the first thing I saw were the 7 tiny blue pills. They were just sitting there, at the bottom of the bathroom trash can, half hidden under a crumpled piece of toilet paper, their silver foil winking at me in the dim light. My heart stopped. I knew instantly what they were. They were mine. They were the active birth control pills I was supposed to have taken every day for the last week. The question wasn't what they were. The question, the one that screamed through my mind with the force of a hurricane, was how? How did they end up in the trash when I was so certain, so absolutely diligent about taking them every single morning with my other medications? And then my eyes drifted from the bin to the bathroom counter, to the little white stick I had just thrown in there. The stick with 2 faint but undeniably present pink lines. A cold, heavy dread started to pool in my stomach, a horrifying realization that was so monstrous I almost couldn't form the thought. My boyfriend's face flashed in my mind. Not his concerned face from a few minutes ago, but the face he'd made when he first saw the pregnancy test. The smile. The pure, unadulterated joy that lit up his eyes. And in that gut-wrenching moment, I just knew this was no accident. To understand how I ended up on my hands and knees, sobbing on the cold tile of my bathroom floor, and digging through my own trash like a madwoman, you have to understand my relationship with him, with Liam. We'd been together for 3 years, but our story started long before that. We were high school friends, the kind who ran in the same circles but never quite orbited each other. We grew apart, went our separate ways, and then, by some twist of fate, ended up at the same college, enrolled in similar majors. We reconnected over late-night study sessions and bad cafeteria coffee. It was easy. It was familiar. You can probably guess the rest. For a while, it was great. It felt like coming home to a place you didn't even know you'd missed. But the rosy glow of rediscovery, like any honeymoon phase, eventually began to fade. And what was left behind wasn't a partnership. It felt more like a chore. Our lifestyles, which had seemed so compatible in the bubble of college life, were starting to clash in the real world. I'm a planner, a doer. I like my space clean, my bills paid on time, my life in some semblance of order. Liam is not. He floats through life with a kind of casual indifference that I once found charming, but was now starting to find infuriating. He's an only child, and to put it bluntly, a massive mama's boy. And that dynamic slowly, insidiously, began to bleed into our relationship. I wasn't just his girlfriend anymore. I was his alarm clock, his cook, his maid, his personal assistant. I was the one who remembered his dentist appointments, the one who made sure there was food in the fridge, the one who picked his dirty socks up off the living room floor. I was becoming his mother, and the patience I had for it was wearing terrifyingly thin. His actual mum is a nice enough woman, I guess. She's polite, always smiling, but in a very traditional, almost suffocating way. For the longest time, I didn't think I had any real reason to distrust her. But Liam confides in her about everything, and I do mean everything, about our relationship. He'd tell her about our fights, our financial struggles, our private moments. It was uncomfortable. It felt like there was a third person in our relationship, one who always took his side. And over the last couple of months, her presence started to feel less like a passive observer and more like an active participant. Whenever I was alone with her, she would find a way to steer the conversation in one very specific direction. It was subtle at first. We'd be in the kitchen and she'd sigh dreamily and say, "The joy of motherhood is like nothing else. You'll understand someday." I'd just smile and nod, brushing it off as boomer talk, but it started getting more pointed. When she knew we were fighting, she'd take me aside, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I know it's hard right now," she'd say, patting my hand. "You know, a baby might bring you closer." Another time she told me, "My husband and I fought constantly until we finally had Liam." She presented it like some magical cure-all. Once you have a baby, everything else just falls away. They're little miracle workers. The one that really sent a chill down my spine, though, came after a particularly bad argument Liam and I had about housework. I was complaining to her, foolishly, about his irresponsibility, his complete lack of accountability. She looked at me with this serene, all-knowing expression and said, "You know, fatherhood changes people. I think Liam just needs to experience it." She was literally suggesting that the solution to his man-child behaviour was to give him a real child to take care of. It was so backward, so deeply unsettling, that I didn't even know how to respond. Still, I never connected her strange comments to any real threat. They were just words. Annoying, manipulative words, but just words. I was on the pill. I was in control. I've always been incredibly diligent about my medication. I even use one of those little weekly pill organisers. Every Sunday, I sit down and pop out a week's worth of my birth control pills and put them in the little slots alongside my other daily meds. To save myself the hassle, I never bothered with the placebo sugar pills you're supposed to take during your period week. I just skipped them and moved straight to the next pack, the empty blister packs, the ones with only the different coloured sugar pills left in them. I toss into a drawer in my nightstand. It's a weird habit, I know. It's this, what if I need it later, mentality I picked up from my dad, who raised us in a semi-doomsday prepping household. We had a pantry full of canned goods and a bizarre collection of odds and ends he was sure would be useful one day. I guess it rubbed off on me. I feel so incredibly stupid for it now. So naive, because one of those empty packs, I now realised, was the key to this whole nightmare. The memory of that day is seared into my brain like a brand. It had been about a week after I noticed I had missed my period. My heart had been hammering a frantic, uneven rhythm in my chest all morning. I took a pregnancy test, my hands shaking so violently I nearly dropped it on the floor. When I saw the dreaded second line, the room seemed to tilt on its axis. I didn't think, I just reacted. My boyfriend was at work, and I called him immediately. I remember the panic in my voice, the way I told him, "We need to talk. It's urgent." I think deep down I wanted him to be the one to tell me it was a mistake, that everything was fine. But he didn't want to come home. He kept making excuses about money, about his shift, about how we couldn't afford any more problems. I started bawling. I wasn't just crying, I was grieving, and I didn't even know what I was grieving yet. I was begging him, pleading with him to just come home, and I think he finally realised I was serious. When he arrived, I was sitting on the bathroom floor. I had been there for 20 minutes, just staring at the wall, feeling like I was dissociating from my own life. I had cried until my throat was raw, until I was physically sick to my stomach. He walked in, his eyes darting around the room until they landed on the test sitting on the edge of the sink. And then his expression changed. It wasn't shock. It wasn't concern for my obvious physical and emotional breakdown. His face, it lit up. A genuine, radiant smile broke across his face. "Oh my God, baby! This is great!" Those words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave the room. I was sitting there, shattered, terrified, thinking about my student loans, our shared lack of income, my own chronic health issues that would make a pregnancy dangerous for me. And he was smiling. He was happy. It was as if he'd just won the lottery. I tried to explain, through snot and tears, that no, this was not great. I told him we were both full-time students, that we were scraping by just to pay rent, that I couldn't take time off, that I was scared. I even told him, and this was the hardest part, that I've always been pro-choice, but the idea of having an abortion for myself felt like a mountain I wasn't sure I could climb. I was drowning, and he was floating in some fantasy world where a baby would fix every single one of our problems. He eventually left the bathroom because I couldn't stand the sight of him. I needed to cool down, to be alone, to process the fact that my partner and I were on entirely different planets. That's when I saw it. The trash can was overflowing slightly, and there, sitting right on top, was one of my empty blister packs. I don't know what made me look. Maybe it was just that nagging, suspicious feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with the universe. I moved the pack, and that's when I saw the foil. I started digging. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the bag. I pushed aside the tissues and the remnants of my breakdown, and at the very bottom, I found them. 7 of them. My active birth control pills. I stared at them in the palm of my hand, and for a second, my brain refused to compute. They were the ones I was supposed to have taken every day that week. I realized then that while I had been taking my daily cocktail of meds, blindly grabbing the pills from my organizer, Liam had been the one to fill the slots. He had swapped my active, hormone-filled pills for the inert sugar pills from those old, discarded packs in my nightstand drawer. He didn't just take them out, he replaced them. He was so incredibly careful to maintain the illusion that I was still protected. He knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted me to have a period that never came. He wanted the 2 lines on the test. I felt a scream building in my throat, a primal, violent sound that I had to choke back. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a violation of the most fundamental kind. He had taken my bodily autonomy and sold it for a dream of a family that didn't exist. He hadn't just ignored my wishes. He had actively, calculatedly, sabotaged my health and my future. I sat there in the dark, the reality settling over me like a lead weight. I wasn't just a girlfriend anymore. I was a target. And suddenly, those conversations with his mother, the miracle workers and the fatherhood changes people, made perfect sense. I wasn't being paranoid. I had been living in a house with 2 people who were plotting to change the trajectory of my life without my consent. I knew in that moment that I had to leave. I didn't say a word to him. I waited until he was distracted, packed a bag, and snuck out of the apartment to go to my parents' house. I didn't tell them the truth. They're religious, and I didn't know if they would judge the pregnancy or the termination. I just told them things weren't working out. But even as I sat in my old bedroom, the silence of the house didn't bring me peace. My phone was blowing up. Liam was texting me non-stop, his messages a chaotic mix of, "Come home, we can talk about this, you're being dramatic, and I just want us to be a family." He didn't know I knew. He thought he could still charm his way back into my life, back into my bed, back into his plan. The guilt I had felt earlier about the termination started to evaporate, replaced by a cold, sharp-edged resolve. I wasn't going to be a victim in his story. I was going to be the one to write the end of it. I sat in the dark of my childhood bedroom, the glow of my phone screen acting like a strobe light in the silence. Every time the screen lit up with another notification from Liam, my skin crawled. He was still playing the part of the devoted, concerned boyfriend, completely unaware that his mask had slipped and shattered on the floor of our bathroom. I didn't block him. Not yet. I needed that stream of consciousness, that trail of digital breadcrumbs he was leaving behind. It was my evidence, my insurance, my way of knowing exactly how he was trying to manipulate me from a distance. But the silence in my parents' house was heavy. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I had walked into that house as a daughter, but I felt like a stranger. My parents are good people, but they're tied to a faith that I wasn't sure could handle the messiness of my reality. The thought of telling them that I was pregnant and that I was planning to end that pregnancy because the father was a monster who had assaulted my autonomy felt like detonating a bomb in the only safe space I had left. So I kept my mouth shut. I pretended to be sick, to be tired, to be just taking a break from the city. That's when I turned to my friends. I needed a mirror, someone to tell me if I was losing my mind. I told them everything. I laid out the timeline, the strange comments from his mother, the missing pills in the trash, the way he smiled at the positive test. I waited for them to tell me I was overreacting, that maybe I'd made a mistake, that I was just grieving. Instead, they were silent for a long time, and then one of them said the words that finally anchored me. "This isn't a relationship issue, OP. This is a crime." Hearing them call it sexual assault, it felt like someone had peeled back a layer of my skin. It was painful, agonizingly so. But it was also the truth. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had systematically dismantled my protection against pregnancy so he could trap me. It wasn't love. It was coercion. It was an attempt to overwrite my future with his own desires, a gross, entitled theft of my life. The friend who had always been my anchor, the one I'd known since we were kids, became my lifeline. She didn't just listen, she strategized. She looked at me, her eyes hard and steady, and asked, "How do you want to handle this?" "I'm terminating," I whispered, the words finally feeling like a weight being lifted, rather than a burden being added. "I'm not bringing a child into this, and I'm not tying myself to him for the rest of my life." "Then let's get you to the clinic," she said, not missing a beat. "And then we get you your life back." But before I could move forward, I needed closure. I needed to see him break. I needed to know that he knew what he had done. My friend reached out to him over text, posing as a mutual ally. She played the part perfectly. She told him she was worried, that she knew something had happened, and that she was on his side. It was a gamble, a massive, dangerous one. But Liam was so desperate to be validated, so convinced that he was the hero of this twisted story, that he couldn't help himself. He poured it all out. He confessed. He gave us the play-by-play of how he had switched the pills, how he'd been checking my Fitbit to track my cycle, how he'd convinced himself this was for our own good. Reading his words on the screen, seeing him treat my body like a science experiment he was conducting, I felt a rage so pure it almost cleared the fog in my brain. It was a cold, white-hot fire. And then the appointment day arrived. My parents, my sister, my aunt, and my friend all gathered around me. There was no judgment, only a fortress of love. We had a girls' day before I went to the clinic. We ate, we laughed, we cried. We just existed together. In that space, surrounded by women who cared about my heart and my health, the guilt started to recede. I wasn't failing anyone. I was saving myself. The procedure went well. No complications. Physically, I was tired, drained, and raw. But emotionally? For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could breathe. The chain that Liam had been trying to forge around my neck had been snapped. But the storm wasn't over. I had the confession. I had the physical evidence. I had a story that was, quite frankly, a nightmare. I sat down with an attorney and then a legal advocate from an organisation that deals with reproductive abuse. They walked me through the landscape of Illinois law. They told me that what he did was reproductive coercion, a term I hadn't even known existed a month prior. They told me it was a form of sexual violence, that I hadn't consented to the sex that led to that pregnancy because I hadn't consented to the lack of protection. The process was slow, bureaucratic, and exhausting. But I wasn't doing it just for me anymore. I was doing it because of what I discovered about his cousin, Mark. Through the grapevine, through bits of information that drifted back to me, I realized this wasn't a one-off. His family was a lineage of predators. They didn't see women as partners. They saw us as vessels, as utilities to be managed. The realization that there was a cycle of this abuse, that other women had been caught in their web and hadn't been able to fight their way out, made my blood boil. I didn't care about the risk anymore. I didn't care if the police thought it was just a relationship spat. I was going to push. I was going to scream until someone listened. I had already left the life I knew, quit the job I hated, and move back into my childhood home. I was starting over from zero. And if I was going to rebuild my life, I was going to make sure the rot of that family didn't follow me into the future. But as I sat there, preparing to fight a legal battle that would likely take years, something else was happening. Something I never expected. My friend, the one who had stayed with me through every breakdown, every tear, every late-night panic attack, she was still there. She was sleeping in my childhood bed, sharing my space, making me coffee, and reminding me that I was a person, not a pregnancy test. And then, one night, in the quiet of my old room, something shifted. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was just a glance, a touch that lingered a second too long, a feeling that had been buried under the weight of my normal life for years. I realized I'd had a crush on her since high school. It was like finding a secret room in my own house that I'd forgotten to open. Was I ready for a relationship? No. Was I ready to handle anything serious? Absolutely not. But for the first time, I felt alive. I felt like the future wasn't just a threat. It was a blank page. The months that followed weren't just about healing. They were about reclaiming the version of myself that had been systematically erased. Every morning, I woke up in my childhood bedroom, and for the first few minutes, I wouldn't know where I was. I'd have that fleeting, terrifying sensation of being trapped in that apartment with Liam, staring at those damn blue pills in the trash. Then, the sunlight would hit the wall, and I'd see my friend, my now partner, sleeping peacefully beside me, and the panic would subside. I'd breathe, I'd stretch, and I'd remember. I am free. But freedom, I learned, isn't a destination. It's a messy, exhausting, legal and emotional battlefield. I had filed my charges. I had served the civil suit. And then I had to wait. The silence from the legal side of things was more deafening than the screaming had been back in that apartment. My attorney, a sharp, empathetic woman who treated my case with the gravity of a murder trial, sat me down in her office one afternoon. She told me the hard truth. Reproductive coercion is a nightmare to prosecute. It doesn't fit neatly into the checkboxes of the law. The prosecutor is hesitant, she told me, her voice gentle but firm. They see a he said, she said situation with the defendant who has no criminal record, a wealthy family, and a pristine reputation at his university. They don't want to risk a loss on a case they deem ambiguous. I felt a surge of cold fury, but I didn't break. I had my screenshots. I had the confession. I had the record of his erratic behaviour. The way he'd been fired from his serving job for making customers uncomfortable. The way he'd started showing up to classes in full, formal, almost funereal attire. He was unravelling. The mask hadn't just slipped. It had been shredded. But the legal system, as it turned out, didn't care about his mental state. It cared about the letter of the law, and the law in Illinois was evolving. We were pushing for a precedent, for a recognition that what he did to me wasn't just a breakup dispute. It was a violation of my right to exist as a sovereign person. They're dropping the criminal charges, my attorney finally said weeks later. The air left the room. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. All that exposure, all that vulnerability, all that trauma I'd laid bare. For nothing? But, she continued, her eyes brightening, the civil suit. We've reached mediation. They want this gone. And they want it gone now. His family is terrified of the public fallout. They know that if this goes to trial, the story of what happened to me and the stories of the other women in that family will be on the front paper. I realized then that his family wasn't protecting him because they loved him. They were protecting their image. They were protecting their bank account. I didn't care about their motives. I cared about the check that was coming my way. A fat chunk of change, as my lawyer called it, that would allow me to move, to pay for therapy, to never have to look over my shoulder again. I didn't take the money because I wanted to be rich. I took it because it was the only form of justice I could get from a system that was fundamentally blind to the nuances of reproductive violence. And then there was the cousin, Mark. Through the grapevine, the messy, tangled web of mutual friends and whispers, I heard about his wife, Kathy. After the dust settled and my ex's confession leaked, the reality for Kathy had come crashing down. She'd been living in the same prison I had, only she hadn't managed to get out in time. She had the child. She was trapped in the same traditional, suffocating, patriarchal nightmare I had narrowly escaped. But hearing my story, seeing that someone had fought back, had given her the courage to start her own divorce. I reached out to her once. It was a short, fragile conversation. There was no girl power cheerleading, no trite advice, just a recognition of two people who had been burned by the same fire. She was getting out. She was taking her life back. And that, in a way, was a victory far greater than any legal settlement. My own life, meanwhile, was becoming something I didn't recognize in the best way possible. I had quit the dead-end job. I was finishing my degree online from the quiet sanctuary of my parents' house, which had somehow transformed from a place of religious rigidity into a fortress of support. My dad, once so focused on the rules, had shifted toward a kind of quiet, meditative virtue ethics. He didn't ask questions about the abortion. He didn't ask about the lawsuit. He just made sure I had everything I needed to be safe. He cleaned the house, he cooked, he gave me space. He was, in his own way, apologizing for a world that had let me down. And then there was her, my friend, my partner. We had gone from friends to something else, a secret blooming in the ruins of my old life. We had kissed that one night, that first week, and it had felt like a secret kept between two survivors. Now, months later, we were living in a blur of shared chores, late-night study sessions, and the kind of deep, uncomplicated intimacy I hadn't even known was possible. She was my anchor. When I'd wake up from those nightmares, the ones where I was falling, always falling, she would be there, her hand in mine, her steady breath pulling me back to the surface. We were looking at apartments. We were planning a life that wasn't dictated by the expectations of a mother-in-law or the manipulative demands of a man-child. I still have bad days. I still get angry when I hear a certain song or see a specific type of car. I still feel that phantom pain in my stomach when I think about the pills. But the anger is different now. It's not the white-hot, consuming rage of a victim. It's the cold, sharpened steel of a survivor. I look at my cat, who now sleeps on my lap while I work, and I realize I've built a world where I am the center. Not Liam, not his mother, not their traditional expectations. Just me. People ask me, if I could go back, would I change anything? And I realize that as much as I hate the trauma, I love the person I've become. I had to be broken to realize I was being held together by the wrong things. I had to lose everything to realize I was the one who owned the pieces all along. It's funny how, in the movies, the ending is always a big, sweeping, cinematic moment. You know the kind. The music swells, the truth comes out, the villain gets arrested, and the protagonist rides off into the sunset. But in reality, the ending is just quiet. It's the sound of a closing door. It's the weight of a legal document finally being signed in a beige, air-conditioned room that smells like stale coffee and corporate lawyers. It's the realization that you're not looking over your shoulder anymore. Life today is vastly different, even if it feels mundane. I'm 4 months removed from the settlement, and 4 months past the point where I finally felt like I could breathe without that invisible, suffocating pressure on my chest. I'm living with my partner now, my girlfriend. We're in a place that's entirely our own, filled with half-unpacked boxes, a cat that loves to shed on everything we own, and the kind of peace that feels almost sacred. I still think about that bathroom floor. I think about it every time I open my current birth control pack. I'm diligent, sure, but there's a new kind of awareness there, a hypervigilance that I suppose will stay with me for a long time. I don't leave my meds out. I don't share my apps. I've learned that the people who claim to love you the loudest are often the ones trying to turn you into a character in their own private script. Liam? I don't hear much about him anymore, and honestly, that's the greatest gift I could have asked for. The grapevine tells me he's still wearing his weird formal suits to class. He's still acting like a ghost of the person I used to know, an empty vessel wandering around a campus that doesn't know what he did. It's tragic, in a way. Not for me, but for him. He spent his whole life being coddled by a mother who taught him that he was the center of the universe, and now that the world has refused to play along, he has absolutely no idea how to exist. He's not a monster in the way you see in horror movies. He's just pathetic. He's a hollow shell who thought he could manufacture a future by stealing someone else's. And his mother? She's still out there, somewhere, probably planting seeds in someone else's garden, whispering about miracle workers and the joy of motherhood to the next girl who's unfortunate enough to cross her path. But that's not my fight anymore. I've stepped out of the ring. My parents and I have found a new rhythm too. They're kinder, softer. I think they saw the wreckage of what happened, and they realised that their traditional values weren't the armour they thought they were. They don't talk about the why or the how anymore. They just see me when I come over for dinner, and they see that I'm happy. And for them, I think that's finally become enough. One of the most surprising things about this whole ordeal has been the sheer number of women who have reached out to me. When I first started posting about this, when I was just a terrified girl sitting on a bathroom floor trying to make sense of the math of my own life, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was uniquely cursed, but the messages I get now from women who have had their own birth control sabotage stories, from women who have had partners steal their agency, from women who just needed to be told that they weren't crazy. It's overwhelming. There's a silent network of us out there. We've all been through the same fire. We've all had to learn that the most dangerous thing you can do is assume that the person who sleeps in your bed has your best interests at heart. My partner and I, we're looking at harnesses for the cat now. We want to take her on walks, to let her see the world, but keep her safe. It's a metaphor, I guess. We're learning how to be safe while still being open. We're learning how to trust again, not in the way you trust a partner to hold your secrets, but in the way you trust yourself to handle whatever life throws at you. I don't know if I'll ever fully get over the betrayal. Some things don't heal so much as they become part of your landscape. They're like a scar. It's always there, and if you touch it, you remember exactly how you got it. But the scar doesn't hurt anymore. It's just skin. It's just proof that I survived. I often think back to that moment in the trash can, with the silver foil and the blue pills. If I hadn't looked, if I hadn't had that doomsday prepper paranoia that I used to hate about my father, I would be a mother right now. I would be tied to Liam for the rest of my life. I would be another Kathy, another victim in a family of people who don't see humanity in anyone but themselves. The thought doesn't make me cry anymore. It makes me realise that I am one of the lucky ones. And because I'm lucky, I have an obligation. I have an obligation to be loud, to be honest, and to tell the truth about what happens behind closed doors. If you're out there and you feel like something isn't right, if your partner is being too helpful with your meds, or if your mother-in-law is obsessed with your reproductive choices, or if you feel like you're losing control of your own life, listen to that voice. That voice isn't being dramatic. That voice is your survival instinct, and it is the most valuable thing you own. Don't let anyone convince you to turn it off. My life is mine again. And that, in the end, is the only happy ending that matters. The air in our apartment is different today. It's lighter, somehow. The boxes that used to clutter the corners are gone, replaced by little things. Framed photos, a small plant that my partner is determined to keep alive, and a sense of stillness that I didn't think I'd ever feel again. We have a routine now. She leaves for her job, I log into my classes, and somewhere in between, there's this quiet, steady hum of two people who are genuinely happy to see each other at the end of the day. I look at her sometimes, just watching her read or make coffee, and I'm hit with this wave of profound, disorienting gratitude. It's not just that she's the one, or whatever romantic cliche you want to put on it. It's that she's the witness to my life after I almost lost it. She knows the version of me that used to wake up in cold sweats, the version that couldn't walk into a pharmacy without shaking, the version that was so terrified of her own body that she felt like a stranger in her own skin. She doesn't just see the me I am now. She remembers the cost of that me, and she holds it with such care. We don't talk about Liam much anymore. He's become a distant, low-resolution memory, like a character in a book I read years ago and mostly forgot. I heard through the grapevine recently that he's dropped out of school. He's back at his parents' house, living that life he tried to force on me. I hope he's bored. I hope he realizes that a life built on a foundation of sand eventually just washes away. I don't wish him harm. I honestly don't have the energy for that. But I do wish for him to see, clearly, exactly what he destroyed. The legal stuff is finally, mercifully, in the rear-view mirror. That final mediation meeting was the last time I ever had to acknowledge his existence. I walked out of that building into the bright, sharp autumn air, and I realized I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like a victor in some epic saga. I just felt quiet. I felt like the person who had been holding their breath for a year had finally been allowed to exhale. I've been thinking a lot about that doomsday prepper mentality I grew up with. My dad used to talk about the long-term viability of a survival system. I used to roll my eyes at him. I used to think it was just another one of his quirks. But he was right. Survival isn't just about stockpiling canned beans. It's about having a system that can withstand the worst of what life throws at you. My system was my friends, my honesty, my refusal to bury the truth, and the gut-level instinct that told me, something is wrong. If I hadn't looked in that trash can, if I hadn't been weird enough to keep those empty blister packs, I would be a footnote in his family's history. I'd be another woman trapped in their orbit, serving their needs, raising their legacy, slowly losing myself until there was nothing left to lose. Every time I walk past a pharmacy now, I feel a little spark of defiance. I see the shelves of medication, and I don't feel victimized. I feel empowered. I am the one who manages my health. I am the one who understands the math of my own body. And more importantly, I am the one who decides what kind of future I'm going to build. My partner and I are talking about moving to a new city after I graduate. A place where nobody knows our names, where we don't have to worry about running into anyone from my old life, where we can just be two people living a quiet, unremarkable existence. We're looking at apartments with big windows and a park nearby where we can take the cat on her harness. We're dreaming of the future, not in terms of children or obligations, but in terms of experiences. Traveling, learning, just being. It's the simple things that used to scare me the most. The idea of having a future felt like a threat, because for so long, I felt like someone else was holding the steering wheel. But now, I'm the one driving, and the road ahead, for the first time, looks beautiful. I know I'm not the only one who has had their autonomy stripped away. I know there are people reading this, or listening to this, who are in the middle of their own nightmare. You might be in that stage where you think it's your fault, where you're trying to fix things, where you're hoping that if you're just a little more patient, a little more kind, a little more understanding, things will change. I need you to hear this. You are not a project. You are not a resource. You are not a means to an end. If you have to lie to yourself to stay in your relationship, you are already living in a cage. You don't need a man to fix your life, and you certainly don't owe anyone a family you don't want. Listen to that voice in your head, the one that's telling you that something is fundamentally, terrifyingly wrong. That voice is your greatest ally. And if you have to burn your entire world to the ground to get to safety, then do it. Rebuilding on your own terms is the greatest freedom you will ever know. I have a life now. It's a good life. It's mine. And I'm never, ever going to let anyone else touch the steering wheel again. If you've been through something similar, or if you're struggling to find your way out, know that you're not alone. Reach out. Tell someone. Don't hold the secret, because secrets are the fuel for people like Liam. Light is the only thing that drives them away. I'm so grateful to the people who helped me shine that light. My friend, my partner, the lawyers who actually listened, and even the community online who didn't look away. You all helped me see that I was worth saving. And for the first time in my life, I truly believe it. It's strange how, when you're in the thick of a trauma, the world feels so small. It feels like you're trapped in a one-room apartment with no exits, and every single thing you do, every breath, every meal, every conversation, is defined by the person who put you there. For months, my entire existence was defined by Liam. His moods, his needs, his obsession with starting a family, and the terrifying, cold realization of what he had done to my body. Now, when I look back at that girl, the one crying on the bathroom floor, the one who felt like her life was already over at 22, I don't see a victim. I see someone who was holding on by a thread, just waiting for the moment to snap. And snap, I did, but not in the way he wanted. He wanted me to break under the pressure of a life I didn't choose. Instead, I broke the mold entirely. We're in a new rhythm now, my girlfriend and I. It's quiet. Sometimes we spend entire Sunday mornings just sitting on the balcony with our coffee, watching the city wake up, not saying a single word. There's no performance, no need to be the mother to a partner who can't take care of himself. There's just two people sharing the space, sharing the quiet. It's the most revolutionary thing I've ever experienced, the simple act of being treated as an equal. I think about the law, and I think about how it failed me. It's a bitter pill to swallow, knowing that because the system couldn't check a box, he walked away without a criminal record. But the civil settlement? That was my version of winning. It wasn't about the money. It was about the admission. It was about the fact that they couldn't stand the thought of a jury hearing my story. They knew exactly what he was, and they were terrified that the world would find out. I don't wonder what his life is like anymore. Every now and then, I'll get a stray thought, a what if that drifts by like a piece of debris in a river, but I don't grab onto it. I don't look up his social media. I don't ask friends for updates. Because to look back at him is to give him space in my head, and he's already taken up way too much of my life. He's a memory that's slowly turning into static. And you know, the most beautiful thing about all of this is the way my perspective on family has changed. For so long, I thought family was this thing you were born into, or something you were obligated to create because that's what people like us do. But family is actually the people who showed up when I was at rock bottom. It's the friend who let me sleep in her bed for weeks, who held my hand through the terror of the clinic, who didn't flinch when I told her I was scared. It's the parents who, despite their own hang-ups, chose to love me through my messiness instead of correcting it. I've learned that you don't have to be a miracle worker or a mother to have a purpose. My purpose is just to exist. My purpose is to finish my degree, to take care of my cat, to grow old with someone who actually sees me, and to never, ever sacrifice my agency for the sake of someone else's comfort. I see comments sometimes from people who say, "You're so lucky you got out." And they're right, I am lucky, but I also fought. I didn't just walk out the door. I crawled, I scraped, I screamed, and I demanded that my reality be recognized. Luck is part of it, but so is the courage to admit when your life is being stolen. If you're listening to this and you're feeling that same tightening in your chest, if you feel like your life has become a series of hoops you have to jump through just to keep the peace, ask yourself, who are you really keeping the peace for? Is it for you? Or is it for the person who is counting on your silence? Don't wait for the right time. Don't wait for a sign. The sign is the fact that you're even questioning it. Your intuition is your survival system. It's the part of you that's trying to stay alive. Listen to it. Trust it. We're planning a trip for next summer. Just a simple road trip. No big deal, just 2 people, a car, and the open road. It's a small thing, but to me it feels like a giant leap. It's a trip taken because we want to go, not because we have to be anywhere or fulfill anyone's expectations. It's a life taken back, 1 mile at a time. I hope, if you're struggling, you find your way to your own road trip. I hope you find your own peace. And most of all, I hope you find the strength to realize that you are the most important person in your own life. Thank you for being here with me, for listening to the parts of my story that were too hard to say out loud for so long. It's been a hell of a journey, but I think, finally, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. It's funny, looking back at the versions of myself that I've cycled through. There's the version that was terrified of her own shadow in that apartment, the one who was constantly walking on eggshells, measuring her words, and trying to be the perfect mother, girlfriend, just to keep the peace. Then there's the version that was huddled in the dark of my parents' house, vibrating with that cold, sharp anger, waiting for the legal dust to settle. And then there's the me of today. People always talk about finding yourself, but that's a lie. You don't find yourself. You excavate yourself. You chip away at the expectations people like Liam and his mother piled onto you until the actual person underneath, the one who was there all along, muffled and stifled, finally gets to breathe. I was at the grocery store the other day, just buying produce for a salad, and I saw a woman with a young child. The kid was screaming, the mother looked like she hadn't slept in a decade, and there was this overwhelming, frantic energy in the aisle. A year ago, I would have looked at that and felt a pang of guilt or obligation, or maybe even a sense of dread. But this time, I just felt neutral. I felt a sense of profound, liberated space. I realized that my life isn't a roadmap that leads to mummyhood by a certain deadline. It's not a checklist. It's just mine. There is so much power in the word no. I spent so many years saying yes to keep the ship from rocking. I said yes to the compromises, yes to the extra chores, yes to his needs, yes to the constant, subtle encroachment of his mother's opinions. And look where that got me. I learned that saying no is not being selfish. It's being a guardian of your own soul. I get messages from time to time from people who ask me about the trigger moments. They want to know, how do I know if I'm in a similar situation? And I always tell them the same thing. You know because you're tired. Not work a long day tired. You're soul tired. You're tired of the gaslighting. Tired of the way your partner makes you feel crazy for noticing things that are objectively happening. Tired of the way your own life feels like it's being slowly drained out of you like water from a leak. If you feel like you have to be a detective to understand your own relationship, you are already in a state of crisis. Trust that feeling. Don't wait for the evidence to hit you in the face like it did for me with those 7 blue pills in the trash. You don't need a smoking gun to decide that your life is worth more than a bad relationship. My partner and I, V, are currently working on a garden out on the back porch. We're growing herbs, some flowers, and we're trying to keep a couple of tomatoes alive. It's such a small, stupid thing, but it feels like such an act of rebellion. We're planting something and watching it grow on our own terms. No one is telling us what to plant. No one is telling us it's traditional or natural to grow this or that. We're just watching life happen, and we're being responsible for it. That, to me, is the ultimate reclamation. I've started therapy too, not because I'm broken, but because I want to be someone who can handle the big, messy, beautiful stuff that's coming next. I want to be able to look at my past without it hurting. And, slowly, session by session, it's working. The nightmares of falling are almost gone. Now, I just dream of driving, winding roads, empty highways, the radio turned up high, and no destination in mind. It's the best dream I've ever had. If you're listening to this and you're feeling scared, just remember, you are not responsible for the comfort of the people who are hurting you. You are not a repair shop for broken men. You are a person, and you deserve a life that isn't a struggle for basic respect. If you're waiting for a sign to leave, to speak up, to go to the police, to terminate, to start your own life, this is it. This is your sign. Do the thing. Make the plan. Get the evidence. Protect yourself. Because the version of you that's waiting on the other side of this is going to be so proud that you finally stood up for yourself. I'm standing on the other side, and the view is spectacular. And I want that for you too. The last time I saw him, well, not saw him, but interacted with him, was in the context of the lawyers exchanging final paperwork. I didn't have to look him in the eye. I didn't have to listen to his voice. That voice that used to soothe me and now just sounds like a recording of a lie. My lawyer handled it all, a brick wall of professionalism between me and the wreckage of my past. And when that final document was signed, when the settlement was official, I didn't throw a party. I didn't go out and get drunk. I just went home, sat on the couch with Vi, and we watched a mindless, terrible reality show and ate takeout pizza. It was the most normal thing in the world, and that normalcy was exactly what I'd been fighting for. I realized something during that final, quiet evening. For 3 years, I had been living in a state of constant, low-level emergency. I was always anticipating his needs, always monitoring the atmosphere of the apartment for his moods, always checking to make sure my birth control was safe, always defending my autonomy against his mother's invasive suggestions. It's exhausting to live that way. It's like running a marathon while wearing a weighted vest and carrying someone else on your back. When I finally put that weight down, I had to learn how to stand upright again. My muscles were weak from all the tension, and my brain was still wired to scan for threats that weren't there anymore. But the beauty of time is that it's a patient teacher. A month ago, I realized I'd gone a whole day without thinking about the pill incident. A few weeks later, I realized I'd gone a whole weekend without thinking about his family. The space that Liam and his traditional demands used to occupy in my head had finally been reclaimed by my own thoughts, my own plans, and my own joy. I want to talk for a moment about the idea of being too much. Liam used to tell me I was too sensitive, or too dramatic, or too demanding because I wanted him to do his fair share of the dishes or pay his half of the internet bill. I internalized that. I thought, maybe I am just too much. Maybe I'm just high maintenance. It took losing everything, literally losing my sense of reality, to realize that I wasn't too much. I was just enough for someone who wanted so little, and someone who wanted to keep me small so he could feel big. Vi is the opposite. She challenges me, not by making me smaller, but by constantly pushing me to take up more space. She's the one who encouraged me to go back to school, who listened to me cry about the court cases, and who never once suggested that I should just let it go for the sake of peace. She taught me that true partnership isn't about one person carrying the other. It's about both of you walking the same path. And sometimes letting the other person lead when the trail gets too steep. If you are currently in a relationship where you feel like you have to shrink yourself to fit, please hear this. You are not too much. You are just in the wrong room. You are a person with needs and desires and a future that is entirely yours. And you shouldn't have to trade your peace of mind to keep someone else comfortable. The moment you realize that your partner is not an equal, but a project or a drain or a liability, that is the moment you have to decide what kind of life you want to lead. I've been doing a lot of reading lately, not just schoolwork, but books about women who fought back, books about the history of bodily autonomy, books that make me feel like I'm part of a much larger story. It's comforting to know that this struggle, the struggle to be seen as a whole person, to be granted the right to say no, isn't new. We've been fighting this battle for centuries. I'm just one small part of it, and knowing that makes me feel less lonely, less like a victim, and more like a warrior. My parents, my sister, my aunt, they've all settled into this new version of me, the one who doesn't apologize for her boundaries. There was a holiday dinner recently where my aunt made a comment about settling down, and I just looked at her, smiled, and said, "I'm exactly where I want to be." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, it was just settled. Nobody pushed, nobody asked. They know now that I'm not playing the game anymore. If there's one thing I'd say to anyone in the thick of a trauma, it's this: don't let them make you bitter. They want you bitter. They want you to become as cold and cynical as they are. But the best revenge is not their destruction. It's your happiness. It's the fact that I can wake up on a Tuesday morning, look at the sunlight on the floor, and feel genuinely, deeply happy. I didn't let them take my capacity for joy. I didn't let them make me hate the world. I'm going to finish my degree. I'm going to travel. I'm going to live in a city with big windows. And I'm going to love the people who showed up for me when I was at my worst. I'm going to live a life so loud and so full of meaning that the years I spent in that apartment feel like nothing more than a bad dream I finally woke up from. And if you're still listening, I want you to know that you can wake up too. You don't have to stay in the dream. You don't have to keep playing the part. The door is right there. You just have to be the one to turn the handle. It's funny to think about how much time has actually passed. When you're living in a state of crisis, in the middle of court dates, police reports, and the absolute disintegration of your worldview, time feels like it's both dragging and sprinting. But now, in the quiet aftermath, it feels like I'm finally catching up to myself. My life isn't a headline anymore. It's not a dramatic series of updates. It's just life. And honestly, that is the most precious thing I could have ever asked for. I think about that girl who was so desperate to be the partner that she ignored every single red flag. The way he couldn't hold a job, the way he expected me to act as his proxy mother, the way his mother was constantly measuring me for a role I never wanted. I used to think that was just the struggle of being 22. I thought everyone was just as miserable, just as tired, and just as confused. I didn't realize that there's a difference between a relationship that takes work and a relationship that takes everything you have. There's a freedom in knowing I don't have to fix anyone anymore. I don't have to curate his life or manage his insecurities. I don't have to wonder if he's going to be better tomorrow. I've realized that my need to fix things was really just a symptom of my own fear, a fear that if I wasn't useful, I wouldn't be loved. But now I know that if love is conditional on my utility, it wasn't love to begin with. It was just a transaction, and I was being sold short. I see him sometimes, or I hear things through the grapevine, not because I go looking, but because our social circles overlap in ways that are hard to avoid completely. It doesn't sting anymore. It's just information. Oh, he's doing that now. Okay. It's like watching a train wreck from 3 miles away. I can see the chaos, I can see the destruction, but I'm not on the tracks. I'm standing on the hillside, and I have a warm cup of coffee in my hand, and I'm just breathing in the air. V has been so incredible through all of this. We started a tradition of having no phone Sundays. No social media, no news, no external noise. Just us, the cat, some old records, and the sun moving across our living room floor. It's a small, boring, beautiful, unremarkable Sunday. And every time it happens, I think about the fact that this is what I was fighting for. I wasn't fighting for a courtroom win or a settlement check. Those were just the tools to get here. I was fighting for the right to have a boring, peaceful, unmolested Sunday afternoon. If you're listening to this and you're feeling like the weight of your own life is crushing you, I want you to remember that the life you're living is not a permanent state. It is a temporary chapter. You have the power to turn the page. You have the power to write a new one where you are the protagonist and you aren't being held hostage by anyone else's expectations. I've had so many people ask me, do you have any regrets? And the only thing I can think of is that I wish I'd seen the signs sooner. I wish I hadn't given myself so many excuses for his behaviour. I wish I hadn't looked at his irresponsibility and thought, I can fix this. But even that regret feels misplaced. If I hadn't lived through the fire, I wouldn't know how strong I am. I wouldn't have the perspective I have now. I wouldn't be the person who knows exactly what her boundaries are, and more importantly, exactly how to defend them. My parents and I have really come a long way. They've gone from being people who were worried about appearances to people who are just happy that their daughter is happy. My dad, in particular, has really taken to heart this idea that virtue isn't about following the rules of a book. It's about how you treat the people around you. He's proud of me. He tells me that sometimes. And hearing that, knowing that I don't have to be perfect to be loved, is a gift I didn't know I needed. I think about the future a lot now. I think about my degree. I think about my career. I think about the places I want to travel. But mostly, I think about the kind of person I want to be. I want to be someone who is kind, sure, but I also want to be someone who is sharp. Someone who isn't afraid to say the hard thing, to make the uncomfortable choice, to walk away when the vibe is off. We're starting to look at a new city, like I mentioned before. Somewhere with mountains, or maybe just a really great coffee scene. A place where we can reinvent ourselves again. Not because we're running away, but because we're running towards something. We're running towards a life that is truly, deeply, and unapologetically ours. If you are currently in a dark place, I want you to find your own version of that run. Find the thing that makes you feel like you are the one in control. Maybe it's a hobby. Maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's just the act of walking out the door and choosing to go somewhere else for an hour. Just do something that is yours. I'm so proud of the community that has gathered here. I'm so proud of the stories I've heard from other people who have walked out of their own cages. You are all so much braver than you know, and I promise you, the view from the other side is better than anything you can imagine. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of my journey. It hasn't been easy, but I finally learned that the hardest paths often lead to the best destinations. And I'm finally home. It's funny to think about how far I've come from that girl on the bathroom floor. When you're in the middle of a storm, you think the rain is never going to stop, that you're going to be soaked and shivering forever. But the sun eventually breaks through, and you realize that while you're not the same person you were before the storm started, you're something else. You're resilient. You're tempered. I've been doing a lot of reflecting lately on the power of the word truth. For so long, I lived in a web of his lies. I believed he was the one who cared about our future, while I was just the irresponsible student. I believed his mother when she told me that my role was to provide, to nurture, to fix. When I finally dragged the truth into the light, it was ugly. It was devastating. But it was real. And there is a profound, healing peace in reality, no matter how sharp its edges might be. V and I, we've gotten really good at communicating. It's like we're building a language from scratch, one that doesn't rely on manipulation or guesswork. We talk about everything. We talk about the past, the way I still sometimes wake up with my heart pounding, or the way she still checks in on me if I go silent for too long. We don't sweep anything under the rug. We look at the dust, we acknowledge it, and we sweep it out the door. It's the kind of transparency I didn't know was possible in a human relationship. I think about the why of it all sometimes. Why did I stay so long? Was it the high school history, the fear of being alone? Or was it just that I was so busy being his mother that I forgot how to be a person? The answer doesn't really matter anymore. The what is what matters. What I did, what I survived, and who I chose to become. My parents, they're actually really proud of Vi. And honestly, it's refreshing to see them engage with someone who doesn't come with strings attached. We have these quiet dinners now, where the conversation flows naturally, without the tension of, "What are you planning for the future?" hanging over our heads. We're just living in the present. And for a girl who used to be obsessed with planning, with prepping, with making sure I was never caught off guard, living in the present is the biggest adventure of all. I want to share something with you all, a realization that hit me while I was sitting on the porch the other day. People ask me what the turning point was. They think it was the lawyer, or the clinic, or the settlement. But it wasn't. The turning point was the moment I looked in that trash can. It was the moment I stopped trusting his narrative and started trusting my own eyes. That one act, that tiny, insignificant act of digging through my own trash, was the most important thing I've ever done. It was the moment I took back the authority over my own life. So if you're ever doubting your own reality, remember that. You don't need a grand gesture. You just need to look for the truth, even when you're scared of what you might find. Especially then. I'm looking forward to the future now, not with that frantic energy of someone trying to escape, but with the steady pace of someone who knows where they're going. I'm finishing up my semester with grades that, honestly, I'm shocked I even pulled off given the chaos. I'm feeling sharp, I'm feeling focused, and for the first time in my life, I'm feeling ambitious about things that I care about, not things I think I should care about. I think back to that cousin of mine, Kathy. I wonder sometimes if she ever got out, if she ever realised that she didn't have to live that life. I hope she did. I hope she found her own road trip. And if she's listening to this, or if anyone like her is listening, please know that you are not forgotten. Your story is part of mine, and my strength is partly yours. We're getting ready to move soon. We've been packing up our little apartment, and it's amazing how little I have that actually belongs to the old me. Most of it is just stuff, books, clothes, kitchen gadgets. The real me, the one that survived, doesn't need much. I need my books, I need my partner, I need my health, and I need my voice. Everything else is just scenery. I'm not the same person who started this journey, and I'm so glad for that. If I had stayed the same, I wouldn't have survived the wreckage. I've become someone who values herself, someone who refuses to be manipulated, someone who knows that her life is not a commodity. And I hope, more than anything, that by telling this story, I've given someone else the permission to become that person too. You are worth more than the chaos you're being fed. You are worth more than the roles you're being forced to play. You are worth everything. I still think about the day I walked into the local police station, not long after I had officially cut all ties. The air in there was stale, heavy with the scent of bad coffee and bureaucracy. I remember the feeling of the heavy glass door closing behind me, a physical, audible thud that seemed to mark the end of one life and the beginning of another. I wasn't there as a victim anymore. I was there as a witness to my own liberation. It wasn't the heroic, cinematic moment I had dreamed of back in my darkest days. No one stood up and applauded. But the quiet, methodical act of filing those papers was, in its own way, the most violent thing I've ever done to the person who tried to destroy me. I was reclaiming my narrative, paper by paper. People ask me now if I ever feel lonely, living this life where I've prioritized my own survival above all else. They ask if I ever miss the comfort of having someone, anyone, there. And I have to laugh because the truth is, I've never felt less alone in my life. Being alone with a partner who is secretly eroding your boundaries is the loneliest experience in the world. It's a profound, hollow ache that no amount of shared history can fill. But now, even when I'm by myself, I feel like I'm in good company. I'm finally in the company of someone I actually like, someone who respects my boundaries, who listens when I speak, and who doesn't treat my body like an extension of their own ego. V and I, we've been looking at maps lately. Actual physical maps, not the digital kind on our phones. We spread them out on the kitchen table, tracing lines across the country, talking about where we want to land. It's a sensory thing, tracing those routes with our fingers, imagining the wind in our hair and the smell of pine trees or ocean salt. It's a way of claiming the world. For so long, my world was restricted to a cramped apartment and the emotional confines of a man-child who couldn't even manage his own laundry. Now, the map is infinite. We can go anywhere. We can be anything. I've had to learn how to exist without the constant, gnawing anxiety that used to be my default state. You know that feeling when you're driving and you keep checking your mirrors, sure that someone is tailing you? That was my relationship for 3 years. I was always checking the mirrors, always waiting for the inevitable accusation, the inevitable guilt trip, the inevitable crisis that would require me to drop everything and become the savior again. Now, when I drive, I just look at the road ahead. I don't check the mirrors for him because I know he's not there. He's back in his own little bubble, and he can stay there for as long as he likes. It's strange, too, how my parents have changed. My mum, who used to be so caught up in the right way to do things, the proper way to be a daughter and a wife, has become my biggest champion. She saw what happened to me. She saw the weight falling off my shoulders, and she finally understood that her version of traditional was a trap, not a foundation. We talk about everything now. We talk about politics, about ethics, about what it means to be a woman in a world that still tries to tell us that our bodies are public property. She's learned, and I'm so incredibly proud of her for that. It makes me realize that change is possible, even in people you thought were set in stone. I've started to think about what I want to do after I finish my degree. I'm not entirely sure yet, and for the first time in my life, that doesn't terrify me. I don't need to have a 5-year plan. I don't need to be the provider or the planner. I just need to be someone who is curious about the world. Maybe I'll go into law. I certainly have the experience for it now. Or maybe I'll go into writing. Or maybe I'll just do something completely mundane and peaceful. The pressure to succeed has been replaced by a desire to experience. I know some of you are listening to this and wondering if you're ever going to get that feeling of peace back. I want to promise you that you will. It won't happen overnight, and it won't happen in a straight line. You'll have days where you feel like you're back in the middle of the storm, days where the anger flares up so hot it threatens to burn you down. But then you'll have a day where you wake up and you don't think about them at all. And then you'll have 2 days, and then a week, and suddenly you'll realize that the person they tried to make you, the small, silenced, subservient version of yourself, is gone. And the person they were trying to hide is the one who's been driving the car all along. If I could reach through this screen and hold your hand, I would. I'd tell you that you are not a burden. You are not a drama queen. You are not too much. You are exactly the right amount of everything you need to be. And the life that is waiting for you on the other side of your courage is worth every ounce of the pain you're enduring right now. Take the first step. Look in the trash can. Look at the bank statements. Look at the texts. Stop looking for reasons to stay and start looking for the truth of why you need to go. Your life is waiting for you, and it's beautiful. I think the hardest part of the entire ordeal, harder than the medical appointments, harder than the legal mediation, harder than the exhaustion of moving my entire life back into my parents' house, was the silence. For months, I felt like I was screaming into a vacuum. I had all this rage, all this grief, all this terrifying newfound knowledge of exactly what kind of monster Liam was. And yet, in the eyes of the law, I was just a woman having a relationship dispute. That silence isn't just an absence of sound. It's an active thing. It's the way the system is designed to make you feel like you're the crazy one. It's the way people politely change the subject when you bring up reproductive coercion, as if you're talking about something impolite or overly personal. But I'm done with being polite. I'm done with the decorum of being a good girl who handles things quietly. I've spent the last few weeks working on a project. It's not school-related, and it's not for anyone else. I'm writing everything down. Every text, every gaslighting comment, every moment I felt my intuition screaming at me and I pushed it down. I'm not writing it for a book deal or for the court. I'm writing it so that, years from now, when the memory of his face starts to blur, I'll have the record of exactly who he was and what he tried to do. It's my own version of a truth commission. And you know what? The more I write, the more the power shifts. He's not the villain of my story anymore. He's just a footnote. A cautionary tale that I'm slowly closing the book on. V and I finally decided on our next destination. We're moving in the spring. We've got our eyes on a city where the mountains are visible from the kitchen window and the air is clean, and nobody knows our middle names. We've been saving our money, my settlement money, which feels like blood money in some ways, but in others, feels like the price of my own freedom. We're using it to build a life that is so far removed from the chaos of my early 20s that it feels like a different lifetime entirely. Sometimes, when I'm lying in bed at night, I think about the fact that I'm still alive. I think about how close I came to a life of perpetual, controlled misery. I think about how, if I hadn't been the person I was, if I hadn't been the daughter of a prepper, if I hadn't been someone who noticed the details, if I hadn't had the support of my friends, I would be a mother to a child I didn't want, trapped in a house with a man I despised, listening to his mother tell me about the miracles of domestic life. The weight of that what if is almost too heavy to carry. So, I don't carry it. I put it down. I look at the ceiling, I listen to Vi breathing beside me, and I recognize that I didn't just survive. I evolved. I want to talk to the people who are in the comments of my posts, the ones who are still stuck. I see you. I see your fear and I see your hesitation. I know what it feels like to worry that you're overreacting. I know what it feels like to wonder if you're the one who's actually the problem. Please, listen to me. The very fact that you are looking for answers outside of your relationship is the biggest red flag of all. If you were truly happy, if you were truly safe, you wouldn't be looking for someone to tell you if you're crazy. You'd be living your life. You don't have to burn your house down today, but start packing. Start looking at your finances. Start telling your friends the truth, one piece at a time. Start building your survival system. You don't have to be a hero. You just have to be a person who decides that their own existence is worth more than the comfort of a partner who doesn't see your humanity. I'm so grateful for this platform and for the way it allowed me to scream into the void until someone actually heard me. I hope, in whatever small way, this story helps you find your own voice. You are the architect of your own future, and no one, not a boyfriend, not a mother-in-law, not a society that wants you to be quiet, has the right to hold the blueprints to your life. I'm finally, truly moving on. And I hope, with everything in me, that you do too. I was looking at old photos on my phone last night, the kind you forget you have until a memories notification pops up. And there it was, a picture of me and Liam from 3 years ago. We were at some college tailgate, both of us grinning, holding plastic cups. I looked at that girl and I honestly didn't recognize her. Not because of how she looked, but because of what was behind her eyes. There was a sort of blankness there, a quiet, polite submission. She was so convinced that she was in love, so convinced that she was on the path to a happily ever after. She had no idea that her life was already being dismantled, piece by piece, right under her nose. I didn't feel sad when I saw it. I felt a weird, protective kind of pity. I wanted to reach through the screen, grab her by the shoulders and scream, "Look in the trash! Look at the pills! Run!" But, of course, I couldn't. I had to let her live it. I had to let her be that girl so that I could be the woman I am today. It makes me realize that we are all just a series of versions of ourselves. And sometimes you have to kill the version of you that is desperate for approval so that the version of you that is capable of survival can finally wake up. Liam wanted the girl in that photo. He wanted the version of me that was easy, the version that was a fixer, the version that was too scared to rock the boat. He didn't want the woman who files civil suits and builds a life on her own terms. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a placeholder. V and I finally booked the truck for the move. Everything is happening so fast now, but it feels like the kind of speed that comes from momentum, not panic. We're leaving the old city behind, the coffee shops where I used to cry, the streets where I used to walk, terrified of running into him or his mother. I'm not running away from them, though. I'm just moving toward a horizon that they don't inhabit. There's a beautiful, clean slate waiting for us in the mountains, and I can't wait to fill it with our own version of peace. I've spent so much time analysing reproductive coercion, reading the legal definitions and talking to advocates. But the biggest lesson I've learned isn't legal, it's existential. It's that your body is the only thing in this world that is truly yours. Everything else, your job, your degree, your reputation, your possessions, can be taken or lost. But your autonomy? That is the fortress. If you let someone breach those walls, you've lost the war. And once you realize that, you never, ever let anyone near the gate again. I know I said this before, but it bears repeating. The most dangerous part of my relationship wasn't the screaming. It was the love. It was the way he'd call me baby, the way he'd pull me into his chest, the way he'd whisper about our future while he was literally poisoning my safety. That kind of manipulation is the most lethal weapon in the world, because you don't even know you're being wounded. You think it's a hug, and it's actually a stranglehold. I've stopped looking for closure from him. I used to think I needed him to admit he was wrong, or to apologize, or to show some kind of human remorse. But I've realized that expecting a parasite to apologize for feeding is just setting yourself up for more disappointment. He doesn't know how to be a person. He only knows how to consume. Why would I want an apology from someone who doesn't even have the capacity to understand the scale of the damage he did? I don't need his apology. I have my own life, and that is a much better prize. To everyone who is still in the middle of their own trash can moment, or who is just starting to suspect that the person they love is working against them, I am rooting for you. I am standing on the other side of this bridge, waving at you to keep walking. It gets easier. It gets brighter. The air gets cleaner the further you get from the people who want to see you fail. You are not a vessel for their plans. You are not a solution to their irresponsibility. You are a human being with the right to your own destiny. And even if you feel like you have nothing left to build with, start with the truth. Just the truth. It's the strongest foundation there is. I'm finally at peace. The kind of peace that doesn't come from a lack of trouble, but from the internal knowledge that no matter what life throws at me next, I will be able to handle it. Because I handled this, and if I handled this, I can handle anything. Thank you for letting me tell my story. It's been the final step in my own healing, and I hope it helps you find yours. Keep your eyes open, trust your gut, and never, ever let them steal your steering wheel. You've got a long, beautiful road ahead of you, and it's going to be the ride of your life. It's funny. Whenever I think back to the person I was on that bathroom floor, I don't feel like I'm looking at myself. I feel like I'm watching a stranger. That version of me was so small, so trapped, so convinced that her reality was only valid if someone else, specifically someone like Liam, agreed with it. When you're in a relationship where you're constantly being gaslit, you lose your internal compass. You stop trusting your eyes, your ears, and your gut. You start relying on the other person to tell you if you're happy, if you're crazy, or if you're overreacting. It's the ultimate form of theft. He didn't just steal my agency, he stole my ability to perceive my own life accurately. But the beautiful thing about truth is that it's impossible to keep buried forever. It has a way of leaking out, like water through a crack in a dam. My truth came in the form of those 7 tiny blue pills in the trash can. That was the moment the dam broke. I didn't just find my pills. I found my life. And I realized, with a clarity that was almost blinding, that I was the only person who could save me. Not a judge, not a lawyer, not even my friends. They could hold the lantern, but I had to be the one to walk the path. I've learned that there is a profound, quiet strength in being a difficult woman. For years, I tried to be the easy girlfriend. I tried to be the one who never complained about the laundry, who never brought up the finances, who never questioned why his mother was suddenly obsessed with my fertility. I thought being easy was a virtue. I thought it was the price of admission for a happy life. But all being easy did was make me a target. Being difficult, which is just code for having boundaries, is the only way to keep the wolves at bay. I've embraced that difficulty now. I'm a nightmare for people who want to control me, and I wear that like a badge of honor. V and I are finally packing the last of the boxes today. It's an odd, bittersweet feeling. This apartment, this town, it's where I survived the worst of it. It's where I went from a girl who was drowning to a woman who learned how to swim in the middle of a hurricane. I'm leaving a lot behind, but I'm not leaving anything that I actually need. I'm taking my resilience, my ability to spot a liar from a mile away, and a heart that is surprisingly, miraculously, still capable of love. If you are currently in a situation where you feel like you're losing yourself, please stop trying to fix the person who is causing the loss. You cannot heal someone who is committed to hurting you, and you cannot build a home with someone who is constantly burning down the foundation. Stop asking them if you're crazy. Stop asking them to validate your feelings. Look at their actions. Look at the evidence. Trust the trash can, not the promises. I think about the future sometimes, and I don't see a straight line. I see a series of mountain passes, of valleys, of winding roads. I see uncertainty, but it's the good kind, the kind that comes from knowing you're the one deciding which way to turn. I don't know exactly where I'll be in 5 years, and for the first time, that feels like freedom rather than a threat. I'm finally living my life for me. I'm finishing my degree. I'm building a partnership based on radical honesty. And I'm nurturing a sense of self that no amount of manipulation can touch. I hope that by sharing this, I've given you the permission to be difficult too, to ask the hard questions, to walk away when your gut tells you to prioritize your own sanity over someone else's comfort. You don't owe anyone your future, and you certainly don't owe them your silence. If you are being hurt, speak up. If you are being controlled, run. If you are being lied to, find the truth and use it to get out. I'm so proud of all of you who are choosing yourselves. It's the bravest thing you can do. And I'm so proud of the woman I've become. She's strong, she's sharp, and she's finally free. This isn't a sad ending. It's the beginning of the only story that was ever truly mine. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt trapped, silenced, or manipulated, I want you to ask yourself, what is one small thing you can do today to reclaim your autonomy? Is it a budget, a therapy appointment, a conversation with a trusted friend? Do that one thing. You'd be surprised at how much power is hidden in the smallest act of defiance. Let me know in the comments how you're taking back your life, and let's keep this conversation going. We're all in this together, and nobody gets to steal our steering wheel ever again. It feels almost surreal to sit here, typing out these final thoughts, knowing that in just a few days, I'll be leaving this state behind for good. I look around this apartment, our apartment, and I see boxes everywhere. Some of them are filled with books, some with clothes, some with the mundane artifacts of a life that I've spent the last year meticulously rebuilding from the ashes. But more than anything, I see a life that belongs entirely to me. There was a moment yesterday, just before sunset, when Vi and I were sitting on the floor sorting through some old papers. I found a receipt from the day I went to the clinic, a small, crumpled piece of thermal paper that I'd tucked away in a folder, almost like a talisman. I held it for a second, feeling the weight of the memory, and then I just let it go. I dropped it into the trash. It wasn't a heavy moment. It wasn't a dramatic, cinematic scene. It was just the final piece of evidence I didn't need to hold on to anymore. I don't need the receipts to prove what I survived. I have the life I'm living now as my living, breathing proof. I've had so many people reach out to me, asking how I managed to keep my head above water when everything was pointing toward complete destruction. And the answer is simple. I stopped negotiating with my own reality. For so long, I tried to find a middle ground with Liam. I tried to see his side, to understand his intentions, to find an explanation for the madness that would make it all make sense. But there is no middle ground with someone who is actively sabotaging your autonomy. You don't negotiate with an arsonist. You get out of the building. And once you're out, you don't look back at the fire. You just keep walking until the air turns fresh again. My relationship with Vi has been the greatest lesson in trust I could have ever asked for. It isn't just that she loves me, it's that she respects the boundary I've built around my life. She knows the trauma I'm carrying and she doesn't try to fix it. She just walks alongside it. We have this unspoken rule: if something feels off, we say it. If we're hurt, we state it. If we're happy, we celebrate it. It sounds so simple, almost basic, but it's the most radical departure from the life I used to live. No games, no hidden agendas, no mothering, just two people choosing each other every single day. I think about the future, the real, actual future, and I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not worried about what happens if I mess up or if I make a wrong choice, because I know that I have the capacity to handle the consequences. I've survived the absolute worst case scenario. I've survived a betrayal that would have broken most people. And because of that, everything else feels manageable. The stress of school, the uncertainty of a new city, the hurdles of moving. They're just challenges, not catastrophes. If you are currently in a dark place, I want you to know that you are not broken. You are just being tested. And the version of you that's going to emerge on the other side of this is going to be so much more capable, so much more authentic, and so much more free than the version of you that was trying to please the people who were hurting you. Don't be afraid to be the difficult one. Don't be afraid to demand the truth. And above all, don't be afraid to walk away from anything that makes you feel small. You are not a secondary character in someone else's drama. You are the protagonist of your own, and it is time for you to start writing the story you actually want to live. As for me, I'm ready for the next chapter. The boxes are being loaded, the car is prepped, and the road ahead is wide open. I'm taking my cat, my partner, my books, and the most important thing I own, my voice. I'm not looking for closure from anyone anymore. I have everything I need right here. Thank you for everything. Thank you for listening, for commenting, for sharing your own stories, and for reminding me every single day that I wasn't alone in this. You've helped me find my way to this exact moment, and I hope that my story, in some small way, helps you find yours. Keep your eyes on the road, keep your hands on the wheel, and never, ever let go of your steering wheel again. This is my life. It's finally mine. And I'm going to make sure every single moment of it is something worth living.